No one had ever shown me how to write any of this stuff. I had just looked at several examples, then I wrote one, and if it didn't look quite right, I poked it till it did. I said, well, you've been reading novels for 30-odd years. Surely if you write one, you will recognize it. I said, okay. So obviously the best way to learn to write a novel is to write a novel. So all right, on my next birthday, I will begin writing a novel. It's not for publication. I'm not going to even tell anyone I'm doing it. I just need to know, what does it take, to write a novel in terms of daily commitment and mental discipline and organization and research and all that kind of stuff. And I need to have the experience of writing an entire novel to know whether I really want to do this or not. So I said, okay, there's a practice book. So what shall I write? So I read everything and lots of it, and I was thinking, well, I read maybe more mysteries than anything else. Maybe I should write a mystery. I said, no, mysteries have plots. I'm not sure I can do that. And so I said, what's the easiest possible kind of thing I could write for practice? No point making it hard. So after a bit of thought, I said, well, for me, perhaps historical fiction would be the thing. Because I was a research professor, I knew my way around a library. And I said, it seems easier to look things up than to make them up. And if I turn out to have no imagination, I can steal things from the historical record. Which actually works pretty well. So I said, fine, historical novel, where shall I set this? Because I don't have any background in history, just the 6 hours of Western civilization they make you take as an undergrad. So, any time would do as well as another. I'd have to look it all up anyway. So I was casting around looking for an interesting time and place to set this hypothetical novel. And I happened to see a really old Doctor Who rerun on public television. Yeah, I'm glad Doctor Who is getting more widespread these days. It used to be that with the US audience, I'd have to stop at this point and explain who Doctor Who is. Whereas in the UK, it was never any problem. Yeah, who's your favorite Doctor? Mine's David Tennant.
Yay!
He's good. Oh, yeah, I loved Eccleston. It was too bad he was so short.
Yes.
In time, that is.
Yeah.
So speaking of short, the inspiration for Outlander was actually one of the very old Patrick Troughton episodes, the second Doctor. And Patrick Troughton was probably even shorter than I am. But in this particular really old show, which has to have been done 50-odd years ago, the Doctor had picked up a young companion, a Scotsman from 1745. This was an 18, 19-year-old young man who appeared in his kilt. And I said, well, that's kind of fetching. Found myself still thinking about this the next day. In church. But I said, well, it really doesn't matter where you set this book. It's, just pick a point and get started. So I said, fine, Scotland, 18th century. And so that's where I began, knowing nothing about Scotland or the 18th century, having no plot, no outline, and no characters. Nothing but the rather vague images conjured up by the notion of a man in a kilt, which is, of course, a very powerful and compelling image. In fact, some years ago when Breath of Snow and Ashes came out, that was a very lucky book for me. It ended up as #1 on the bestseller lists of 4 countries. Thanks to the kind efforts of people like you. But it also won me several awards. I won a Quill Award in the science fiction, fantasy, and horror category. For which I beat out George R.R. Martin and Stephen King. Mind you, this is one of the same books that the Romance Writers of America gave me a Best Book of the Year award for. But I also won this German award called the Corina International Prize for Fiction, which sounds very cool. And it was. I got to go to Germany and accept the award, and while I was there, the German publisher had me interviewed by absolutely everybody in the German press, from tabloid newspapers to their equivalent of Vanity Fair. And toward the end of this long week, I was kind of going like this, staring at people with glazed eyes because I'd been talking so much. But I was being interviewed by some gentleman from a literary journal, and he said, oh, I've read all of your books. He said, your characters are so tremendous, your narrative drive is so thrilling, and your imagery is just transcendental. And I'm thinking, yes, go on. And said, he paused and he said, there's just this one thing, I wonder. Can you explain to me what is the appeal of a man in a kilt? Well, I mean, he was a man and a German, so I was really tired, or I might not have said it, but I just looked at him for a minute and I said, well, I suppose it's the idea that you could be up against a wall with him in a minute. that story to Sam Heughan and he turned white. And then he turned red. And then he started wearing his kilt everywhere.